We are going to let the room get populated here. I see many people coming in, and this is going to be a really important conversation. So we want to make sure that we are all situated and ready to go before we jump into this incredibly timely topic. And I'm going to be moderating here from lovely Lake Tahoe. So dealing with two computers, but this is the webinar universe we live in, and I'm excited to be able to be here to have this conversation with all of you. So first of all, welcome. Welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of Athletes Voices Speaker Series. Athletes Voices is a thought leadership consortium focused on developing politically agnostic, cause-agnostic, action-oriented programming intended to enhance athletes' ability to create impact, influence, fuel change, and develop deep subject matter knowledge. I'm Joanne Pasternak, founder of Athletes Voices and president and CEO of Oliver Rose. Prior to launching Oliver Rose, I spent 9 seasons as the head of philanthropy for the Golden State Warriors and the San Francisco 49ers, and launched the Global Impact Strategy for ServiceNow. Today's conversation continues Athletes Voices advancement towards welcoming a cohort of 50 elite, professional, and Olympic caliber athletes for the inaugural convening of the Athletes Voices Certificate Program in April 2022 at 1440 Multiversity in Scotts Valley, California. If you are an athlete and are interested in learning more about the program, please visit athletesvoices.org and click on Join Us. Last season, the Athletes Voices Speaker Series featured 9 episodes with 30 voices of athletes sharing their perspective on a broad range of topics, from mental health and wellness to environmental awareness, K-12 education, the value of play, and more. This is the 4th of 9 episodes for season 2. This episode is presented in partnership with our academic consortium that includes the Institute for Diversity and Equity in Sports at Brown University, Brown University's Center for Entrepreneurship, San Jose State University's Institute for the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change, Arizona State, Columbia University, University of Central Florida, the Doug Williams Center, which is a collaborative effort with Grambling State University and the athletic conferences of the historically Black colleges and universities. We are also joined today by members of our Student Fellows program who are serving in support of this program for the duration of their semester. Increasingly, professional athletes are asked to comment publicly on a myriad of social, civic, and political topics. Athletes, as we know, are uniquely influential as potential change makers on a broad spectrum of global issues. Today's topic is happening as we speak. There is news coming out, and our guests will speak about this, that talks about opioid addiction and other types of addiction that have plagued athletes for decades, if not centuries. But we're also going to look at the ways that athletics can enhance an athlete's ability to recover from addiction as well. In just a few days, millions will watch with awe as the 2022 Olympic Games come to a close at Beijing's National Stadium. But in the midst of the celebrations, there have been controversies related to human rights, environmental impact, judging discrepancies, the inclusion of athletes believed to be doping. Athletes of all ages feel the drive to succeed with pressure from both internal and external sources. But for those in professional sports, the intensity can be all-consuming. Are there many other professions where your value to the team decreases with experience and where the threat of being replaced is omnipresent? Athletes give their all every single day, pushing through pain and self-doubt, building towards a future where the wear and tear on their bodies can be unbearable. For many, this leads to addiction, but for others, sports are the savior, the place where they can channel their pain and relief. A recent study found that 71% of NFL players had used and or abused painkillers. Some use these drugs to continue to play through the pain and stay out on the field, regardless of injury. Whether it's for pride, big paychecks, or fear of losing their job, painkillers may be a short-term answer to these problems. I will be serving as the moderator for today's conversation entitled The Role of Sports in Addiction and Recovery, taking us on a journey with athletes, followed by thought leaders, and culminating with an open question and answer forum with all of our guests. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. If I could have Mike and Randy join me here on camera. Hello, there's Mike, and there's Randy. Hello. So our first panelist is NFL legend Randy Grimes, a Baylor Hall of Famer and former NFL player who spent 10 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For over 20 years, Randy battled addiction to painkillers developed while treating career-related injuries. He now uses his inspiring story of recovery to serve those impacted by addiction as the founding advocate of Pro Athletes in Recovery, just launched in 2012. Designed to help athletes and non-athletes find treatment for addiction and mental health challenges, the program supports those in recovery and their families. The success of the program has led to partnerships with numerous pro and collegiate sports teams and leagues, bringing treatment to hundreds of individuals and families. A popular commentator on national networks, husband of 39 years to Lydia, father of 2 and grandfather of 4, Randy has also authored a book titled Off Center. When asked about his recovery, I love this statement. Randy states, "God didn't open the gates of heaven to let me in. He opened the gates of hell and let me out." Randy, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. What a great opportunity.
Next, we're welcoming Mike Bennett, also known by his WWE moniker, Mike Kanellis. But man, this man has a lot of accolades behind him. For 21 years, Mike has performed in sold-out arenas and dingy bingo halls as a professional wrestler with WWE, Ring of Honor, National Wrestling Alliance, and the Impact Wrestling. Captivating audiences of 15 or 15,000, or even today in our green room, just the 5 of us, he's had crowds chanting his name or booing him out of the building. Whatever it is, Mike always makes them care. He now brings his ability to engage listeners to his role as a motivational speaker. Mike has battled through hardship and overcome addiction, and by sharing his life experience, he aims to inspire, motivate, and encourage people to be the best versions of themselves, despite any obstacles that might be in their way. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Our other colleague, Joe Nedney, will be joining us in a little bit. But for now, I'd love for each of you to start just sharing a little bit about your story and your journey as an athlete who later turned into an advocate for mental health recovery and wellness. So, Randy, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, there was no indication of what lied ahead for me in high school or college. I had a great high school career, had a great college career. I remember getting to that locker room, though, in Tampa Bay after being drafted in the second round in 1983. And the first thing I learned was that football was no longer a sport. Now it was a job. And the second thing I learned was that you do whatever you have to stay out on that field, because you don't want to get a reputation of always being in the training room, always on the injury report, always being worked on by the doctors or missing practice. You didn't want to get that reputation because that was a reputation you were never going to get away from in what was sure to be a short NFL career. So, what that meant to me was taking handfuls of pain pills every day to practice through the injuries and the nicks and bruises and everything that comes up, and playing through them. Also, I looked at it like a necessary evil because I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted that next big contract. I wanted to be a Pro Bowler. I wanted to feed my family. Those are ways that I justified it. And looked at it like a necessary evil instead of what it really was a full-blown addiction. And, it progressed to the point to where the last 2 years of my career, I was playing entire NFL football games in a blackout. I was taking so much medication, so many opiates and so many benzodiazepines before a game that I was playing in a complete blackout. And, I would come to later on that night and be all beat up and scratched up and fingernails all torn up and dehydrated and everything you are after an NFL football game. And I didn't remember any of it. And I played every down at center. I was the quarterback of the offensive line. I was getting guys going in the right direction. I was changing blocking schemes. I was listening for audibles, doing all the things that you have to do as a offensive center. But, that's what that necessary evil progressed to. And that's what I was willing to do at that time, to feed my family and to be the best player that I could be. I never expected to take that into my retired life.
Well, and it's, Randy, your story could be told by so many, hundreds and hundreds of former athletes. Joe's joined us, and I'll share a little bit about his bio in a moment, but I want to turn to Mike. Mike, your career path and your journey through addiction has been different as well. But could you share a little bit about how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, no. So I started wrestling when I was 15 years old. I'm 36 now, so I've spent my entire adult life as a pro wrestler. And anyone who has somewhat of a familiarity with the wrestling world knows how prevalent painkillers, opioids are in pro wrestling. Not only because, kind of like what Randy was touching on, in the sense that you have to constantly stay healthy. You have to constantly get rid of the pain. You're always worried about the next guy up. You're always worried someone's going to take your spot. But more so in wrestling too, it became part of the lifestyle. A lot of the guys in wrestling, it became cool. It became hip. If you were hopped up on painkillers, if you were out partying all night, if you were taking the painkillers in the locker room. So it became more of an acceptance thing. And when I was in my mid 20s, one of the guys who trained me, Steve Bradley, actually, he passed away from opioids. And I remember telling myself at that moment, I'm never going to touch this stuff. I couldn't believe that someone I loved, someone I cared for, someone that I looked up to so much, let his addiction take his life. But unfortunately, I did. But it was always him and his memory that kind of, I think, helped me and pulled me through. But it's very similar to what Randy was saying, in the sense, at one point in my career, I had a match. This was before I made it to WWE, and I dislocated my patella tendon. I ended up falling down to the ground, popping it back into place, because that's what you do in wrestling. You keep going and you don't stop. And I had more shows lined up. So I just went to the doctor. They prescribed me painkillers, and I just kept going. And the one thing that I remember that happened with me is that when the pain subsided, I still took the painkillers. And that was the hardest thing for me to realize, is my addiction to painkillers wasn't so, it started as a pain thing, and then it turned into more of a mental health issue for me, more of a numbing my insecurities, numbing my failures, numbing everything that I was afraid of. So what ended up as being dinged up all the time and trying to keep going and trying to keep going, I would start convincing myself I was hurt so I could keep taking these painkillers. And it took me on a different avenue. And as soon as I got sober, I've been 5 years sober now, I realized that my addiction was less about the pain and more about what was going on up here. And I think that's such a huge thing that we don't talk about, is like, we talk about the pain in sports, but we don't talk about the fear of failure and the fear of the next guy up and the fear of our insecurities as failing in these sports that we spent our entire lives pursuing. And so much of my addiction was based on my insecurities of everything in sports, and definitely about the pain, because wrestlers get the living crap kicked out of them, just like in football. But it was more so about what was going on up here for me, and what I was trying to mask and hide away.
I mean, the type A personality is more prevalent within sports than perhaps anywhere else. And it's underestimated how much that impacts who we are and how we see ourselves. Joe, speaking of type A personalities, so I've known Joe a long time, and I absolutely adore him. But I'm going to give a little bit of your background, and hopefully my Wi-Fi is okay here, because I'm a little concerned about it being up here in the mountains. So Joe was a place kicker in the NFL for 15 years, the last 6 of those years with the San Francisco 49ers. A San Jose California native, Joe played college football at San Jose State, where he was a 4-year letterman and graduated as the school's all-time leading scorer. After signing with the 49ers in 2005, Joe went 26 for 28 and kicked a career-high 56-yard field goal against the St. Louis Rams on Christmas Eve, after which he was named the co-MVP for the 49ers that season. For 20 years, Joe quietly harbored a pain in his kicking leg, managing the soreness and working around it when necessary until his retirement in 2011. After the NFL, Joe continued to find peace in the mountains of Santa Cruz, while also working as a pre- and post-game commentator for the 49ers, a kicking coach, a landscaper, and involved father to his 2 kids. Thank you for joining us today, Joe, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, please. And he's muted. That was my fault. I muted him. See? Joe, don't let anybody mute you. Yeah, there you go.
Unmuted.
It's all my fault. See, I'm always trying to keep you quiet there.
So yes, hi everybody. I ended up playing in the NFL from 1995 through 2010. And I got into the league right kind of at the end of the prevalence of the opiates being distributed by the athletic trainers or the doctors. And I can remember plane flights home and the doctors just basically walking down the aisles and asking, what do you need? What do you need? And, 2 here, 2 there, 2 Vicodin, 2, whatever. And, it's just, it was a very casual thing. And I was kind of introduced to the whole, hey, if it hurts, take a couple of these and everything will be all right. And that was sort of the culture of the league at the time. And as my career continued, I'm a place kicker, so I didn't get the bangs and bruises, but the repetitive motion, just like a pitcher, I got degenerative arthritic conditions in my knees, hips, and things like that. Just, I'm a big guy, 6'5", 225. So a lot of weight being thrown around. And after those years, I just had a lot of degenerative stuff. I tore both my ACLs, ripped my hamstring off the bone. So I had plenty of surgeries. And just through those surgeries and that lifestyle, what was, just like Mike said, what was pain management turned into a full-blown addiction. But it occurred over a length of probably 10 years of playing. And what was, a couple of pills after a game turned into, a couple of pills in the morning and then a couple of pills in the afternoon. And before I knew it, I was up over 20 Vicodin or Percocet or whatever I could do a day, and not just the 5 milligrammers, the 10 ones, the big ones. And it was, I didn't realize how bad it was until I ran out, and then I found out what withdrawal was. And all of a sudden my skin's crawling. I can't sit still. I can't stay awake during the day. I can't sleep at night. And that was when I realized, oh shit, I'm addicted. But at the same time, I still kind of was holding on to this rationalization that I was still okay and I was managing it. I'm a big guy. I got a high tolerance. Whatever reason it was for me to keep justifying the fact that I was addicted to these things. And the other problem with that is that, somebody should be prescribing these to you, but my consumption was more than doctors could, rationally give. And I didn't want to start floating doctors' prescriptions because I didn't want to get caught on paper. So what that leads you to is the dealer, the guy. And so after my career was over, I was left with an addiction, a hard addiction, and started getting my pills from a not a legitimate source. And right around the time that Prince died, and he was found with fentanyl in his system. Right around that time, I was basically purchased a batch of pills that was laced with fentanyl. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was taking as many as I probably would have died, because I took a couple of these and was nodding off in a way that I wasn't used to. I knew what those painkillers did to me. And as weird as it sounds, when you're in full-blown addiction, you know what 5 does to you, you know what 10 does to you, and you know when you get the sweats, and when your eyes go dilated and glassy and all these things that you're trying to hide from people. And these ones did something different. And I got scared. I got really scared, and I realized, shit, I'm gonna end up dead in my bathroom. And it scared me enough to find avenues to get clean. And it's been, Mike, like you said, it's been 5+ years for me. And the energy that I have now, the attention that I have to my body, is I wish I would have had it when I was playing. Had I known, I was just kind of mixed in this culture of, big pain, big pills, and not looking at the root of what was going on and what I could put into my body healthily that I could help myself manage, what I could do with my mental health to help myself manage. Those pills were the be all end all. It took away the pain. It numbed. It softened all the edges. There's just so much competition, so much stress as a place kicker, and anxiety. You can be fully prepared to go out and do your job on Sunday and still not execute it. And if it's not done at the right time, you're getting heat from everywhere. And you got to go answer all the questions. You got people looking at you sideways because you missed. Is he mentally all right? And all these things. And And it is, it's a very cutthroat business. And so you want to stay on top. You don't want people to know that you're battling or struggling. You want people to know that you got this. And so
Right.
the way I was walking was not the way I was really walking, but it was the way I wanted to see people walking. I was masking something really, really harmful on my body. So it kind of crept and it hit me hard, but I just kept riding it because that's some powerful stuff, man. It's just, and I think the awareness wasn't there for me, not until too late. You know, I wish. I'm glad I'm where I'm at now. I'm healthier than I've been in years. Don't get sick. You know, I mean, I have one of the healthiest bodies. I think I wish I would have had this body 20 years ago. But those drugs, man, I tell you what, the way that I managed pain, the way that I managed stress was not healthy. And it was that pill. It was what it was.
It's interesting, as one of the common themes here is all of you were trying to work through something to enable you to continue doing the thing that you had been training to do or that you loved more than anything at that moment in your life. And, you know, it's interesting, as I was pulling together the panel for today's conversation, I noticed that the folks who I was able to bring in, you guys are all men who are of a certain age. You all have facial hair too. That's a little odd, but the interesting thing is that you came up in sports where toughness is at the core of everything that you're doing. But one of the interesting components was I spoke to a few people who have gone through addiction in other sports and still aren't at a place or a space where they feel like they can come out and say that. And some of those are, and I bring this up because it's in the news right now, we have 15-year-old figure skaters. I'm a former figure skater. I know that I had an ulcer by the time I was 17 because of all the Motrin that I was taking, and I weighed like 72 pounds. So you think about it, these are the things that are being put on our children as well to perform. So as each of you have navigated this, how do you see sports in your lives these days? And I mean, you all are either fathers and grandfathers. How do you envision this taking place within your kids or your grandkids' lives as well?
Well, and I'll start that by saying,
Mhm.
you know, I played back in an era where the coaches kind of, you know, everything was run kind of that Bear Bryant mentality where if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. So we used to beat the hell out of each other all week long. And hopefully there was enough left in the tank to play on Sunday. And so that attributed to a lot of injuries, just the practice itself. I never understood that mentality, but that's the way it was back then. And, you know, I think now with the new collective bargaining agreements that the NFL has, that the players obviously practice, they never put on the pads like they used to. There's less injuries during the week. There's less, guys are having longer careers as a result. But, you know, I played back in an era where anything goes, you know, it's that warrior mentality. And if you're not out on that field in your position, somebody else was going to be, and you were not going to let that happen. And you did whatever you had to stay out there.
And replaceability is one of the hardest things to move around, right?
Yeah, and you know, even today with the changes that they've made and the changes they've made with the way they prescribe narcotics, even today, guys still put pressure on themselves to get back out there sooner than they should. You know, coaching staffs and owners still put pressure on team doctors to get a guy healthier sooner than they should. So that mentality still exists, and that'll never go away. You know, as long as professional sports is a money-making machine that it is, you want those great players on the field.
And I can speak to just, you know, when you're in an NFL locker room, you got 53 alpha dogs in this. There's a lot of testosterone moving around that locker room. There's a lot of guys that earn their position and ain't gonna give it up, and they're not gonna let somebody else take their lunch. And you know, you hear "I'm fine" a lot, and I always felt like that was a lie. You know, when somebody said "I'm fine," it was like, no, you're not. That's you just missing everything. And I'm fine. Just leave me alone. I'm fine. I'm fine. And that was one of the things that it's a double-edged sword, because you want to show your toughness. You want to show that you can withstand it. You want to have that moniker of, this guy can handle it. He's one of us. He's good. There's definitely a stature there, that you want to attain, and a respect level that you want to have with your peers in that locker room. So yeah, I mean, and if I'm thinking about my kids, when I before I even had children, I remember telling myself, if I have a son, I'm not going to pressure him to do anything that I did. Because society's going to say, oh, your dad was a place kicker. Are you a kicker too? And I knew that he was going to probably field all that. Oh, you're going to play in the NFL thing. So, knowing the dark side of the sport and knowing the competitive nature, there's obviously a lot of rewards financially in it, but there's also a lot of dark sides to it too. And I kind of made a vow to myself that if he chose that path, that I would guide him through and give as much mentorship as I could with my own life experience. But in no way, shape, or form was I going to steer him in that direction. And my son is 16, and he's a typical teenage kid that loves to ride his skateboard. He's an amazing skateboarder, but he has absolutely no interest in the traditional sports, and that's just fine with me. I love him to death, and he is who he is. But so to answer your question, Joanna, a little bit, what I saw, I would want to guide the next generation of kids through that and show them firsthand the perils that are out there, and also ways to not just to steer clear, but better avenues to take to make sure that your body stays healthy the right way, that your mind stays healthy the right way, emotionally, and as well as mentally and physically. So, and it's out there. It's just, there's a lot of easier paths that people will take. And it's not always easy, and it's not always a straight line, but sometimes you got to take a little bit more of a tougher path in order to get the right result. And that's something I think it's tougher to teach these kids nowadays, because they're all just instant gratification. So that's my kind of, I don't want to call it an onus, but I feel like that's my job to these younger athletes, is to try to tell them, look, man, or, look, this is what's out there. There's a lot of fun, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of camaraderie, but there's some dark sides too, and there's ways around it. So that's what I'd say.
Just to kind of piggyback off what Randy was saying, like, as much as we've advanced in the medical field and everything in sports, it's in pro wrestling, it's still very prevalent to get hurt in a match and try and push through it. It's like considered a badge of honor. You break a bone and you don't stop. And I'm lucky enough that I'm still actively wrestling. And I was just at a show a couple weeks ago where one of my buddies came back from his match and he was limping. And then the next day I saw him at the show again and he was limping again. And I was like, hey, dude, are you good? And he's like, no, something's wrong with my leg. And I'm like, you're going to go get it looked at? And his answer was, nope, I'm a pro wrestler. I'll be fine. And that's the mindset is, no, I'm not going to get it looked at. As long as I can walk, I can keep going. And I think it's as much as we know, and we're still learning, there's still that mentality in sports, whether it's football or hockey or even performance sports and pro wrestling, where it's this tough guy mentality of just rub some dirt on it and go out there. If you can walk, you can go. And we still have so much we need to teach people. And I'm trying to, I mean, my kids are still so young right now, but to me, I want them. The reason I started talking about my addiction is because I want my daughter and my son to go, oh, okay, this is a path that I could end up down. But as long as I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel because daddy did it or daddy survived it, I want them to use me as the example. And not only, again, so much of what I believe addiction is we deal with the pain, but then we deal with the mental side of it. And I tell my daughter, I drill it home that it's okay to fail. You're going to fail. If you don't fail, you'll never succeed. And so much of that, I think we need to teach athletes. We need to teach younger people, is that I think we mask our pain and our failure, and we numb it through these painkillers. We get it because we're hurt, and then we don't let it go because our insecurities and our failures creep up on us.
And I want to double down on that. I think, you mentioned the tough guy mentality, the tough person mentality, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so when I was pregnant with my son and I was working for the San Francisco 49ers, I have never felt more aware of something that, was just here I am pregnant at the organization, people trying to caretake for me, trying to tell me how much time I should take off. And all I wanted to say was, don't you know I'm a former athlete? I'm going to work through this. I'm tough. I've got this. And it's interesting. And Joe and I were working together back then. I worked until 5 days before my son was born, and I was at Candlestick Park walking around with a 9.5-pound kid, doing check presentations and everything else. But it was because of that mentality that exists in sports. I was afraid that if I actually went on maternity leave for any extended period of time, that I would be replaced. Just like the guys on the field, just like the women who are out there doing sports, we are taught in sports that there's always somebody faster, stronger, better coming up behind you. So again, around that, what is the role that sports plays in your lives now, and how do you find joy and uplift in sports? And Joe, I know you're out in nature as often as you can be.
Well, yeah, I volunteer as a kind of a specialist coach with the local high school kids. Get out there with the kickers and snappers and punters and holders and returners, and I get an hour with them on the field, and they give me so much more than I give them. And the football field to me is it's not a place of trauma, especially if it's out at the practice field when there was nobody around. It was a place of healing. It was a place that I could go out there and not be judged and have a good day, a bad day of practice or whatever. And the only person that saw it was the person randomly jogging around the track around the field. So being out there with the kids and telling the rest of the coaching staff to stay off the field, this is just us getting better and having fun and letting the kids' personality come out and allowing them to get better without feeling that judgment of, if you hit a ball or if you drop something, it's okay. That's why we're out here. We're out here. This is practice at specialist period. You're supposed to get better, and keep a positive vibe, because there's just a lot of pressure with sport. It just comes with it. So I'm still attached to it, but it's at a level where I feel like I get the most reward and I make the best connections with the kids. And to me, that high school age is really when these kids are falling in love with sport or whatever it is that they're falling in love with. And so to have a mentor, somebody there that's been through it and been through it through all levels and can be a credible voice with them, and then also can connect with them too, and there's not such a separation. That's my goal, and that's the fun that I have, and I feel like I get a really good response from the kids, and I get to know them too, not just as kids and pads and players and numbers, but I know them by their names, by their faces, by their personalities too. So it goes a long way for me, and I think it goes a long way for them too.
Absolutely certain it does. And Mike, it's interesting because as Joe's talking, I'm thinking about, well, first of all, you have an amazing, tremendous personality, big personality. You can command a crowd. That's part of the training that you have, but it's also part of your natural way of just being. But did you feel like you had access to resources to support you in your recovery? And if you did within your profession, how was that communicated to you? And if you didn't, how were you able to find the support you needed and to be able to navigate through this addiction?
So, I mean, at the time when I got sober, I worked for WWE at the time, and they have a tremendous rehabilitation program, even for ex-employees, where they offer for guys, if you have an addiction and you haven't worked there for years, you can reach out to them and they will pay for your rehab and take care of you. And I commend them for that. But again, being the pro wrestler, being the constant not wanting to fail, I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't take their services because I was afraid that it would come back to me. I was afraid that I would be looked at as weak. I was afraid to show them my vulnerability to that way. So actually, and I say this all the time, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, until the day I die, my wife saved my life. My wife absolutely saved my life. I remember when I finally came out, we were down in Florida. We were supposed to go to Universal Studios. I was all out of pills. I was, like Joe was saying, dealing with the withdrawals, which are not fun. And I made her cry again. And to me, it was the last time. It was the absolute last time that I was going to make her cry. And I knew at that moment, I had said to myself in my head, this is make or break. This is, you're either going to die from this or you're probably going to ruin your marriage. Luckily, my wife is a saint and it didn't ruin my marriage. And I just remember she looked at me and she said, give me your phone, give me your wallet, give me your keys. We're going to take care of this. And we locked up in a hotel for 2 weeks. I went to the hospital where they gave me medicine for the withdrawals. And she sat there with me when I had the shakes at night, when I had restless leg syndrome. She made sure I was eating, make sure I was doing everything. I'm going to get a little emotional right now because she's my entire fucking world. Pardon my language. But because I had that tough person mentality of, you can't tell WWE this, because not only that, I had just started. I had worked my entire career, 17 years to get to WWE. And it was about 2 weeks into being at WWE that I decided I was going to get clean and sober. And I thought I was going to get fired. I thought I was going to be done. So I kept it all inside for a long time. I kept my recovery inside. I only told a few of the guys that I traveled with on the road. So when I was on the road, they took care of me. They looked out for me. But I still think, as much resources as WWE offers, which I want to make it abundantly clear, they offer a ton of resources to guys. The guy I mentioned earlier, my trainer, Steve Bradley, used to work for them. He had gone to rehab and he was a week out of the WWE sponsored rehab when he had passed away, because he had tried to go back to the normal dose that he thought he could do, and he just couldn't do it anymore. But I think we still need to get into people's brains and let them know that these resources are out there, and you need to be vulnerable about it. You need to let people know. You need to put away this tough person persona, and you need to essentially suck it up, man up, whatever you want to say, woman up, however, and go, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let people in and say, hey, I have this issue and I have this problem. And if it wasn't for my wife being like, no, we're going to take care of this, I don't know if I would be here right now.
No, that fear of being found out is so real. I can remember going through it and calling the NFL and saying I have a problem, and then going, okay, well, we need you to come in and we'll put you through the random drug test program and things like that for 2 years. And I went, I'm not gonna, everybody in the locker room is gonna know when the drug test guy comes that I'm not just randomly doing it, I'm doing it multiple times a week or whatever. There's no way I'm letting the world know that I'm going into the program. I'll figure it out myself. Thank you very much, goodbye. And that stigma is real, and it's hard to fight against, because you don't want people to know that you've got a weakness. Even, I'm far enough removed from it now, and I'm comfortable enough in my experience and far enough removed from it that I can talk comfortably about it. But it took a long time. I remember going to AA meetings, and the whole anonymous part was huge for me, because I could sit in a room with people that were going through the same things, and nobody knew. Nobody, and even if they did, they didn't say anything, because it's anonymous. That's the way it works. And so right. It's a very difficult thing to try to get somebody to actually admit, first of all, that they're using or abusing or addicted, but that they can't do it on their own anymore. And only that person, when it's time for that person to make that decision, is when you can help them. But knowing and watching is so hard sometimes. It's really hard. And I know people did the same with me. I tried to hide it the best I could, but eventually it all falls apart on you. And so
yeah, that's all that ego. And in my decade in Tampa Bay as a starting center, I had 5 different head coaches. I had 6 different offensive line coaches. I had 10 different quarterbacks get up underneath me, and 4 different general managers. But the one consistent thing about that time is me being able to start at offensive center. But I remember when Sam Wise put his hand on my shoulder and said that they wouldn't be needing me anymore, I remember raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. And Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And that was just throwing gas on an already raging dumpster fire. When I didn't have that uniform, to put on anymore, or that playbook to look at anymore, or that itinerary to go by anymore. I struggled for a long time, and that fueled the addiction that was just getting worse, because the injuries were just getting worse. My tolerance to the medication was just getting worse. I needed more and more pills all the time. So I was just doctor shopping all over Houston, Texas was a full-time job just to feed an addiction that was already going. But it wasn't until 20 years later, when I got into rehab, that I finally grieved the death of Randy Grimes, the football player. I mean, it took that long. And I didn't even realize it, I didn't realize that that was what was fueling everything. And it took all that time, and I had to let go of that and reinvent myself. And that was in rehab. That was in 2009. And I retired in 1993.
It's a long road.
The chat is blowing up with questions, and I want to say this out loud. The number one thing we're hearing from people is that they're here with you, and they're grateful that you're sharing your stories. People are sharing their own stories in the chat as well. In fact, my own brother is on the chat, and he just shared with me, he was a very high-level collegiate pitcher, and he just shared that he was popping Vicodin in high school, which I did not know until this moment. And that's what you guys are doing right now. You are making it something that people can talk about. And one of the questions that's come up before we go to our next panel, I do want to get to this really quickly, and then we'll have a bunch of questions as we go into the Q&A component. But when you were going through all of this, do you feel like people knew what was going on? And do you feel like they were enabling this need to maintain the identity that all was okay? And how would you have approached it differently if you saw a teammate who was?
Well, and let me say that in the probably 8.5 years of my career that this was going on with me, not once did anybody ask me, Randy, why are you slurring your words? Or Randy, why are you nodding off in meetings? Or Randy, why are you late to practice every day? Or Randy, why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the drug safe? Nobody ever asked those questions, because I was always playing good.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I know in wrestling, it's part of the culture. So if you're popping pills with a bunch of the rest of the boys. Like that's just the way it always was. Everyone was either doing a show, popping pills, going to the next show, popping pills. That's how it was. I know for me, the hardest thing I had to deal with was I made it a point to keep it from my wife, because I knew what I was doing was wrong. And so I had to not only deal with my recovery, but I had to deal with completely losing her trust. Because when I finally opened up to her, when I was crying that moment in the parking lot in Florida, she said to me, I always knew something was wrong, but I thought you were cheating on me. Because I was so secretive about everything and the way I was going about it, she thought I was having an affair. And I wasn't. I was a full-blown addict, and I was just trying to keep it from her, because I knew what I was doing was wrong subconsciously. Even though I think, Joe, you had said it. You can convince yourself that what you're doing isn't wrong, even though there's a part of you that knows what's wrong. So in my head, I was constantly saying, well, I'm not homeless on the street, so I'm not a full-blown addict, or I'm not like this person that I see in the movies, so there's no way I'm an addict. But I couldn't go a single day without it. And so I think the hardest thing for me was I worked so incredibly difficult to keep it from the people I loved. A lot of people in wrestling didn't think anything of it, because it was just part of the daily routine. If you got hurt, you popped a pill and then you moved on. You didn't know who was an addict or who wasn't, or who was popping it when they woke up, and then at lunchtime, and then at dinner time. Nobody knew that, because everyone just did it. So it was an entirely different world.
Yeah. And with mine.
All right, go ahead, Joe. Actually, I was gonna say in figure skating, they used to say ice it, wrap it, and put it back in the boot and just tighten the laces. And we all had this, we thought of our boots as like, well, they're basically casts. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. So that's what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
I hid my addiction so well that when I came out, people were just blown away when I started sharing with them actually how deep into the addiction I was. And that in itself was so unhealthy because you're holding something so close to your chest. You don't want the world to know about it. And so, you know, I had a million explanations for everything, whether it was if I started sweating when you're not supposed to start sweating, it's just, hey, I got a really aggressive metabolism, and you know, I got a warm core, I got whatever it was, I'm an athlete, you know, I burn calories, whatever. And I just remember thinking I could convince myself that, and everybody else convinced. In fact, I remember going on a family photograph shoot, and I had to have ice packs shoved in and around my waist to cool my core because my forehead was beaten up so bad and it was looking bad in the photos. And so I had to, my wife at the time brought ice packs to put in, and she's just thinking, well, my husband is, you know, he's an athlete, he's just got a high metabolism, and I'm full into addiction. And so she didn't even realize that she was enabling. I had kind of manipulated the whole situation. It's I don't want to use shameful because I don't look back at it. This was shame. It was my experience. It was what I did. It was my story, and I've recovered from it. But sharing these details, sharing these things, they're important. And with these kids too, you know, I think that one of the questions I read was, you know, with kids going into these competitive sports, you know, listening to this conversation, this panel's got to scare the crap out of parents, you know, but really, in honesty, we're just kind of giving you our real deal program. And a lot of it is in the culture, but it's not 100%. And the awareness, I didn't have the awareness. And I think that there were programs that could lead the horses to water, but none of the horses were thirsty for it, you know, and there were no consequences at the time. It was just, you know, keep going. And so I think just that mentorship, when these kids are getting into these competitive sports and they're starting to push themselves to that level, there is a balance. There is a mental, emotional, and physical balance that goes with all of it. And if you push too hard in any of those directions, your body will push back at you in some way, whether it's a panic attack, whether it's muscle cramps, tornness, you know, whatever it is, your body's going to end up rebounding back at you if you push it too hard in one direction. So that balance, that whole wellness thing, to me, I wish I would have had earlier. And that's what I would pass along to these young kids as they're getting to this competitive nature, is that you got to find something that makes sure that you're balanced. Otherwise you will end up a cautionary tale, you know? And so that awareness is really, really important.
Well, and instead of how we were raised by our fathers, where you dust yourself off, you pick yourself up, get back in the huddle, big boys don't cry, all that stuff. Instead of that message, the message should be that it's okay to not be okay. Yeah. You know, it's okay to not be okay, but you've got to raise your hand and ask for help.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I mean, gentlemen, this has been incredible. We will come back to you because we have plenty of questions. But I think that is actually a perfect segue over to our next two speakers, who are practitioners in this space and specifically work with athletes on navigating it. So I'm going to have you guys go on pause for a little bit, take a deep breath. And again, from the bottom of my heart and from the heart of those who are listening, thank you so much for your openness. So with that, I'm going to have you guys go back into the green room, and I'm going to ask Blue and Chase to join me here. Hello. All right, terrific. And so Joe, you can sneak away here. I'm going to put you. Hold on, there we go. All right, perfect. So Blue, wow. Okay, so first of all, let's take a breath. It's a lot. I know you guys do this every day. But I really do appreciate you being here. I do want to give some background as to who you guys are and why you're here with us today. Blue, I'm going to start with you. Blue is a well-known clinical mental health counselor, CMHC, and a substance use disorder counselor, and the founder of Addict to Athlete. Blue grew up in a dysfunctional home and struggled with substance abuse and other issues due to the trauma he suffered as a child. Congratulations, you have been clean and sober since 1996, which is tremendous. Blue states he's turned his mess into a message and now helps others do the same. He specializes in addiction treatment and is passionate about helping others. He helps erase addiction and replace the void with sports. He has raced multiple marathons, ultra cycling events, triathlons, and ultra marathons. Addict to Athlete's vision is to assist athletes in recovery from all addictions, not just substance abuse, and to get on the path of healing through the achievement of new goals. So that's a little bit about Blue.
Thank you.
Chase, I'm going to turn to you now and share a little about your background. So Chase is the Vice President of Clinical Operations for J. Flowers Health Institute. They are partnering with the NFL on a number of initiatives, and he's really quite a relevant speaker on this topic. Chase has worked in the counseling profession, both as a counselor and a healthcare administrator for 9 years, and is skilled in several areas of counseling, thanks to his passion for helping others. He earned his bachelor's degree at Texas Tech University in Human Development and Family Studies, then went on to earn his master's degree at Texas Tech in Counselor Education. During his time at Texas Tech, Chase was a varsity letterman in cross country, as well as track and field. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time mountain biking, road cycling, and playing with his 3 big dogs. And I love your dogs' names, by the way, so I have to read them. Kippy, Kingston, and Dexter. I might have to take Dexter as one of my next dogs, but you gentlemen are right in the middle of all of this. But I'm going to start, Blue, with you. If you could share a little bit about how you navigated your own journey and how it led to the creation of Addict to Athlete.
Yeah,
that's a great place for us to start.
Thank you. Yeah, what an honor to be here with all you guys. I'm just here kind of in awe listening to everyone's stories. For me, myself, growing up in a family system that was very dysfunctional, a mother that was married at age 14, like a child having children, it put us all, me, myself, with my other 3 siblings, put us in a lot of bad places. And so growing up is kind of learning to kind of survive really was the essence of doing whatever it took to get whatever we needed. And that, the disappointments, those sadnesses, those pains, that abuse that we all suffered, it is great fuel for an addiction. And it took over in my early teens and went well into my early 20s. And so much so that, it changed my perception on what I could achieve in life, high school dropout, all this kind of stuff, thinking that life was in and out of dysfunctional marriages. My mother's been married and divorced now, I think 7 times. And so it was this constant, just this downtrodden and loathing life, and thinking that, there's no end to this. So addiction was pretty much part of my family system since day one. But it wasn't until I kind of had a little bit of an episode of clarity, where I started figuring out that I believe all of us have this sole purpose inside. A guy who kind of risked a little bit of, emotional vulnerability with me, invited me to kind of see his world, which was a lot more stable. It was very closed off, very, aggressive with anyone that wanted to help, because, people equal pain. So when I allowed myself to be vulnerable to this man, this mentor of mine, and he started showing me things that a family system does that doesn't really require like pain or avoidance or manipulation to build a relationship, I was kind of blown away by it. Slowly but surely, I started getting myself involved with a treatment program as a courier. I took these kids to and from 12-step meetings. So I was like the silent recovering person early on, sitting in all these meetings with these adolescent kids at a treatment center, not knowing that I was gaining all this information and I was just taking them. So I was getting paid to kind of like sit there and listen to like, oh, I'm not the only one that struggles with this. But what happened exponentially is just like Mike's talking about. It was a girl that I met at this treatment center, my wife, Marissa. She was a recreational therapist. I'm a high school dropout. I thought she was kind of neat. So started trying to rub shoulders with her, and was totally anticipating going on to this life with 100%, like my past. I'm not going to talk about it, but I had to manipulate. I had to lie to keep all those secrets from coming out. It's a dysfunctional family. Long story short, we started dating and getting serious. That mentor of mine let all my secrets out to her because I wasn't going to tell her. And it was, Blue, either you go get help in therapy or else we're not going to be able to move anywhere. So I went into my first session of therapy. Guy called me out. It was horrible. But funny now that I'm a therapist, because I went back after I was like, swearing I'd never go back, and opened up and let some stuff out that really throttled me into what I do today, which is, helping people overcome addictions. Had to go back to high school as a high school dropout. No one in my family ever graduated high school, let alone college. So to me, I was blazing these new trails. As I made a shift from that negative mindset over here to this recovery, kind of helping people, my whole family system, they kind of pushed me away, because now Blue's made it out. So he's holier than thou. And I had to sacrifice a lot to gain my stability, to create my own family. Addict to Athlete started as a necessity in my community, because we didn't have anything other than just traditional 12-step meetings. And that's great, but there was more to it. I caught my clients one day as I was working in the field, kind of forging their sign-off sheets and the 12-step notes saying that they had attended. And they're like, Blue, we just don't think this is working for us. We know we need to do this. So I thought, well, health and recreation kind of got me clean as I started a mountain bike early on, because I didn't have any friends. I had to cut myself off. So I bought this mountain bike, I started riding, it got me clean. I thought, what if we try something different? What if I started a meeting with my clients to see if I can train them for a 5K? My supervisors gave me the blessing. They were like, they're all ex-heroin users, so please be cautious and careful, because they're not the healthiest kind of folk. And I'm like, it's cool. I know CPR, we'll be fine. And 5 of my clients, they decided to jump in, and we trained them. But the craziest thing happened is, as we're training for this 5K, this couch to 5K program, as I'm out running with them, therapist and client, they start telling me all this stuff about themselves that I never heard in my office. I'm like, why were you guys telling me this? We're out here running and training for a 5K, but you won't tell me in my awesome feng shui office I was told to have. And it was just this movement. As movement happens, your mind begins to clear. In essence, it's a modality called EMDR therapy. I thought I was doing something new, but it's just EMDR therapy. And pretty soon we were having these tremendous therapeutic sessions while people were running. That was in 2011. And then now, all these years later, 2022, we've reached thousands of athletes, chapters all over Utah and out of the state now. And our message is to erase the addiction, replace it with things of greater value. And like all these gentlemen are doing today, turning the mess into a very powerful message.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. We have in our chat here, we have a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in track and field who's saying group runs are good for that.
Absolutely.
You get talking, whether you're an Olympic gold medalist or you're just a recreational runner or a recovering addict, it brings something up in you. Absolutely. Now, Chase, let's turn to you, because the work that you're doing at the J. Flowers Health Institute, it's unique. It's a multidimensional approach to recovery and addiction.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's real quick to, group runs. Yeah, I'm a former runner. Not anymore. My calves can't do it. But, that's where you get to know somebody for real. My buddies and I talk about all the time. The best conversations I had in college was on a dirt road in West Texas for 20 miles. Yeah, we're doing something really unique and different. Dr. Flowers has been in this industry for over 30 years. I've been lucky enough to work with him in chronic pain management, addiction, and mental health for about 12 years of that. Kind of worked with him off and on over the years. And when he started this 3 years ago, the idea is that we're going to create a living MRI of someone. We're going to take a full 360 view of what somebody looks like. So many people recycle through so many treatment centers and get known as frequent flyers, and they never quite find the right answer. And it's just because they Googled someplace, they found that it was close by or was a state away, whatever it might have been. And it takes 2-3 weeks of being there before they might even have some kind of conceptualization of this person. And so the whole goal of us is to take a deeper understanding of them, where over the course of 10 business days, we take a concierge style approach where we have people flying from all over the country, and for the matter of fact, all over the world, whether it's India, Israel, London, even Japan. And they come in and they stay at a resort and spa, and then we pick them up and we take them to about 15 different appointments over the course of 2 weeks. Because something missing inside of healthcare is that your providers don't collaborate. They don't talk to one another. I know when I ran my private practice, it was extremely hard to get anyone on the phone, whether it was a psychologist or it was a nurse practitioner, and just to figure out, okay, like, what are you thinking med-wise, diagnostically, what are you seeing here? How are your sessions going? What are they opening up to you about that's different than what they're saying to me? And that's the goal of this. So when people come in, they'll have 2 different therapists that they're going to work with, the primary and secondary, and they're going to see at least one of them, if not both of them, every single day. They're going to go to internal medicine and have a full executive blood panel done, and our doctor acts like kind of the quarterback of, do they need to go to neurology, they need an MRI or a CT. From there, we're going to go through a nursing check. We're going to go through a nutrition evaluation and see what their life with food is like. And for athletes, you know, when you're an athlete, you're eating at a certain level, but when you're not an athlete anymore, you start to overeat, or you're under eating for that matter. You know, you being a figure skater, mentioning weighing that not much at all. And it's, what is your relationship with food? What is your body image like? If we need to do an eating disorder evaluation, we can do those as well too with a specialist. We also go through genetic testing, finding out what kind of medications actually work with your body specifically. And that can go everything from painkillers, that can go sleep medication, that can go psychotropic medication. We'll do a physical therapy examination, because chronic pain is a very big thing that we work with here, and definitely work with somatic symptom disorder and things along those lines. And so doing a full physical evaluation of what's called a functional capacity exam. And then we'll even do a DEXA scan and a VO2 max to see what your bone density is, see what your fat mass is, your muscle mass is. And then also we'll do a full trauma evaluation, just because you know, many of the stories that we hear through, whether through addiction, through chronic pain, is that there is this history of trauma that most people have never opened up about. And we have found this crappy, you know, coping mechanism along the way with addiction or within some kind of personality function that keeps us protected. And so to understand those traumas and what style specifically of therapy to work with that trauma, whether it's something like EMDR or somatic experiencing or craniosacral or Rolfing or even hypnotherapy. We'll do full psychological testing, whether it's projective testing with like the old school ink block Rorschach, or we'll do neurocognitive testing. That's really big for our NHL guys and our NFL guys that come through here, just because you're constantly banging your head against a wall. And then we also, you know, we'll of course sit down with a psychiatrist, and that psychiatry evaluation can go anywhere from an hour and a half up to 3 hours over the course of multiple days, just because every individual is different. And one huge thing that we're working with is we partner with a group called Neurologics, and you do a test that's called a brain map. I've been lucky enough to do it myself and do the optimization protocol as well. And it's where you sit down and you wear an EEG that measures 293 different domains of the brain at the speed of thought. And it maps out your entire brain, and it breaks down about, I want to say about 50 different sections of the brain of how the circuitry is firing. And it shows, are you relapse prone? Do you have a high probability of addiction, depression, anxiety, sleep, emotional irregularities? And then through our wellness program, or even outside of here, you can do a thing called optimization, where you sit down 3 times a week, you plug into an EEG, you do these different kinds of basically brain games, and it helps refire the circuits in your brain so you're thinking clearly. It can raise your IQ, it raises your stress IQ. And one thing, you know, that Randy said was, you know, grieving the death of an athlete. I know I went through it in my mid-20s when my whole life had been track and field, and all of a sudden it left you. And that's something that we commonly find, is that, you know, when somebody steps out of that role, all of a sudden all their structure is gone, their community is gone, but they're left with these painkillers, they're left with this addiction or alcohol, whatever it might be. And it's, how do they address that? Especially when they have been told their entire life, don't talk about those things. That's not tough. That's not what you're supposed to do. And what you said, Joanne, about, you know, my figure skate is basically a cast. I remember ripping every ligament out of my ankle and being on the track in a week to go run a 420 mile, which for me was fast. I know for our Olympic gold medalist, it was probably just practice. But I remember specifically sitting there with my best friend who was a trainer and finding the best way to wrap this just so I could fit it in my spike and so I could go out and run because of the pressure of my parents being in town. So it's very, very interesting and how it all works. But we take that 360 view of someone, and then we are hyper-focused individual on them. 95% of what they do here is going to be individual. And the main thing is that all these doctors, all these providers, these practitioners, we all communicate the whole way through. So we can come down to exactly what these diagnoses are. Is it actually a personality type that's causing this addiction issue? And so this way we can come to true recommendations of what you need to seek for treatment.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I'd be scared to go through all of this myself because
sometimes I feel bad.
No, but it's, I mean, it's amazing. And I'm going to bump this back to Blue, because the athletes we're talking about, well, no, I mean, in reality, everybody, we've all experienced pain that painkillers don't mitigate. So Blue, I know that's one of the reasons why you've turned to this activity-based therapy as well, but what do we do? What do we do when the pain is real and the over-the-counter Motrin isn't enough?
Yeah. See, that's the age-old question, right? Physical versus mental pain. Your brain can't really tell the difference. It hurts somewhere. And the interesting thing is pain is an indicator that something's wrong, obviously. And so when we ignore that, we continue to play or push through life without taking care of the pain, whether it be physical or mental or emotional, it's going to have the same results, which is going to be trying to find something to hide it. I mean, we live in a world now where no one wants to experience pain either, right? You go down to the pharmaceutical aisle, you'll see maximum strength Tylenol, extra strength Bear. They're the same medications as the normal stuff, but the word maximum or extra makes it look like we're going to get rid of pain faster. So what I do with my athletes too, and a lot of them have legitimate back issues, foot problems, all kinds of stuff, is we start them at their level. And then we find out, you've been taking this medication for a back problem for so long that's gotten you addicted. They've actually kind of learned to embellish the pain to a certain degree, and they get off it after they do some of the detoxing aspects of recovery, and they realize that the pain's not as bad as they thought it was, but it's still there. And so there's a lot of modalities we can use, but again, I think that there's so much to this. When we go through that pain management, that pain understanding, we find out the source of it. What we truly find too is that there's a lot of emotions that are attached to that. Like, talking to Randy before on my podcast and just listening to Mike and to Joe, each of them suffered not just physical pain, but emotional pain when something ended, but nothing compared to the pain. And I'll use Randy as an example because I've had him on my podcast. And I remember asking Randy, nothing hurt as bad as whatever happened on the field is the day that treatment door shut behind you and you knew that like it's game on. That had to hurt. Hitting the first day at residential treatment when knowing that your wife and your family's not there. That was real pain. I tell my athletes, it may hurt, but it doesn't hurt as bad as that jail door slamming behind you. That's pain. And so by dissecting where it's coming from and to find out what's caused by the physical parts of pain versus what's on the emotional side is key. And then it's going into it slow, right? It's about being able to build endurance and recovery through time and through effort and through consistency. And the coolest part about this is each one of these guys are talking about turning their mess into the message. None of them, not even you, none of us, were supposed to be just one thing. Therefore, we're not just addicts. It's a part of us. We're not just football players. It's part of us. We're not just wrestlers. It's part of us. Because now you look at Randy, right? Randy's a mentor. He's a producer. Joe's a coach. He's a mentor. He's out there bringing up this next generation. Mike is a producer. He's out there creating these experiences. These are the things that we need to start learning into, and to start softening that pain a little bit by saying, hey, I'm more than just a football player, professional athlete. Now I'm also a father and a brother and a scholar and an artist and so many more things. So we build on these things, which helps deal with that and channel the pain in a positive direction.
Oh, that makes sense. And it's interesting because I think at Jay Flowers, one of the things that you're doing is you're identifying where our innate abilities might be.
Correct. Yes. And, to kind of bounce off of that, it's what Mike said, I was convincing myself that I was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
To make it okay that I'm using these painkillers. And that's just because pain becomes your identity. I can't tell you how many clients we have detoxed here and I've seen over the years where once we get them off painkillers, all of a sudden their pain is gone. And that identity that you have tied to that torn up knee or that shoulder, that if you actually can start to approach it the right way through physical therapy, if you can start to approach it the right way through the proper kinds of treatment, most importantly through your mental health, how that pain number can go from a 6 down to a 3 and it becomes much more tolerable and more sustainable for you. And for a lot of these athletes, you train one way. That's what you've done your whole life, and learning how to be a different kind of athlete, learning how to train differently can actually help with that pain.
And that's where I think Chase and Blue, I hope that the two of you, I know you're just meeting here for the first time, but I hope that you find ways to collaborate, because I think there is some magic to that. I mean, how many of us have gone to the ER for something and they hold up that little chart that says on the scale of, I think it'd be pretty funny to look and see where elite athletes put themselves on that little pain chart. Cause I know for me, I'm always like, well, it's not that bad. Still don't have a severed limb. I'm dying here. I'm a 2
for 8 weeks and it was no big deal. I thought it was just a shin split. And then they made me get an x-ray, gave me a boot when I walked out. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You're tough.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. So I do want to bring Mike and Randy and Joe back into the room, because I think as we're continuing to have this conversation, that the relevancy of their experiences is really significant. So gentlemen, if you could join us back here. There's Randy and Mike, and now we just need Mr. Nedney here. But Mike, I want to start with you here. Like, as you're listening to Blue and to Chase, what's resonating with you? And as people are asking here, what can be done to help somebody who's in the throes of the addiction?
To me, it's it's okay to be vulnerable. It's this idea of just talking to someone, just letting them know that you don't always have to push through. You don't always have to convince yourself that you have to be the best. It's this idea that, again, it's okay to fail. And I think we look at failure and injuries as the same. If we got injured, we failed. You know, you get, I mean, you hear it in football all the time. So and so is injury prone. We put the onus on the player. And it's like, wait a minute, if you cut a certain way and your ACL gets shredded, that has nothing to do with what the player did. He just got injured because of that. We have to stop putting this onus on these players and think that they're failures, or that they have to push themselves to the extreme. You know, it's not healthy, and we get to a place where we're just going to continuously push ourselves where it's going to lead to an addiction. And that's the biggest thing for me, is we need to start telling people you don't have to push yourself to that limit. Take a step back. Understand this whole thing of having more than just one identity. It was so big for me to realize that I wasn't just identifying as a wrestler. I wasn't just identifying as someone who was dealing with pain. I was so much more than that. I became a father, and now I'm at a place in my life where I'm trying to mentor younger wrestlers, and I'm trying to be a motivational speaker. And your life is bigger than what you put on yourself. You're not just always going to be a pro wrestler. Not only that, I'm not going to be the same person I was a week ago, let alone 10 years after my wrestling career ends. So I think we need to start drilling this message home to people that you are going to be more than just one thing. So even if you tear your ACL and then you never wrestle, you never play football again, there's a wide world out there bigger than you and bigger than you could ever expect. And I think if we drive that message home and let people know that when one thing ends, it's not the end of your life, it's literally the beginning of something new.
Well, okay, so for each of you, just really rapid fire here, what's the thing? What's that thing that when you feel most at peace nowadays?
My kids.
Kids.
Well, what makes me feel most at peace is helping people, you know, giving, you know, they say you got to give it away in order to keep it. So that's what I do. But, you know, like Mike said, it's okay. And I said earlier, you know, the message should be that it's okay to not be okay. You've got to check that pride and ego, guilt and shame. You got to check that at the door and raise your hand and ask for help, because there is hope and help out there. When I came into treatment 12 and a half years ago, there was nothing out there for former NFL football players. You know, that was the whole birth of Athletes in Recovery, and why I started that, to be a bridge between players that I knew were out there sick and suffering in silence, and resources. But the message was always, it's okay to not be okay.
For me, you know, once you attain that professional level status, you start to believe the hype that we're all superhuman. You know, we got to this level. Not many people get to this level. We are above human, and so we can't show vulnerability. We can't be just human beings. And it's actually one of the things I love about sports as a whole, is because it's the greatest reality show ever. The human element will always be the X factor in sports, and I think that we have, society and athletes as a whole, have hidden that human element. Nobody wants to see the human element. They just want to see you go do your job and do it well and all that. And we're starting to see a lot more athletes come out talking about being human and having mental issues and having emotional issues and sharing them. And I found that even people are a little uncomfortable with that. They don't want to hear that, you know, but that's what's going on. And I think if we can all just understand, we're all just humans. We're all on the same level. We are people. We all have, you know, 2 legs, 2 arms, all those types of things. And we have tendencies, human tendencies, where we're going to try to seek things and try to seek easier ways and try to do what's comfortable for us and all that. And that's perfectly normal and okay. And if I can take my life experience and guide somebody and just give them a little bit of reference along the way, and it helps somebody and somebody listens and the light bulb goes off, then I have done my job, and I'm happy as can be. So to me, I think it's just that human element. We're all humans. We're all the same. Some of us got to use our skills in little different ways than others, but we are all the same people. So if we can just kind of get down, especially those athletes, those competitive athletes, get down off of that superhuman pedestal and take a breath. We're humans. It's okay. You know, that's important.
That's the best. I love it. I mean, I'm getting charged up listening to that. You're absolutely right. Connection is the cure. And I didn't get to see Randy play football, all these things. But when I hear what they're saying, I'm like, I'm blown away. Because if connection's the cure, then that means that it takes, I heard this once, you guys, and Randy, Joe, Mike, I love this so much. Each one of us had the capacity to change 70,000 lives through residual things. Now you guys going out and doing the work, doing this stuff right now. So all these people are listening, you're going to change lives. At that rate, it would take 8,000 people to change the world. You couldn't do that on the football field. You're sharing the stage. Now, these interactions, Randy's taking phone calls, Joe's working with these kids. This is where the real stuff happens. Now, I'm not going to downplay any football careers or wrestling careers, but that was great. But you guys, this is where you make real change. So you sharing this, changing lives. Like I'm blown away by it. Thank you so much.
Blue, that's the whole premise for Athletes Voices is these. I mean, kudos to the 42 athletes so far who have participated in the Athletes Voices webinars on topics like mental health, environmentalism, K-12 education, all of these topics. You guys have a platform and you are choosing to use it. You're vulnerable and you're coming out and you're saying it. But just because your tweet might reach 500,000 people doesn't mean that your experience is differentiated, but it does help to normalize it and it does help to bring visibility and awareness. And I think that's tremendous. Question from the audience, which I think is very interesting and a little bit different. With the opening of monetary compensation opportunities for collegiate athletes under the new name, image, and likeness regulations, what should colleges be aware of with the vulnerability of their athletes to addiction? And how does that pressure trickle down? I mean, it scares the heck out of me, I'll be honest.
Pandora's box, man. I worry so much. I worried so much for younger professional athletes who got these signing bonuses and had no financial training, nothing. They just had their crew that they're tossing money to. And I just, and there would be programs, but these people would not be, they just wouldn't care. So, and these are 23, 24-year-olds. Now you're doing this to 18, 19-year-olds. I would really hope. Yeah, I mean, I hope there's training and discipline that come along with it, because the younger you are, the more you need. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to it. I think kids should be compensated for the amount of money they bring into the university, but I think it should be in the form of an annuity that is passed on to them upon graduation. So that way there's an incentive not only to graduate, but also at the end of their career. So, maybe by then they will have a little better advice. They'll be plugged into an agent or somebody who can help them financially place that money and put it securely up somewhere. So there's a lot that can be done there on that front.
Well, and I go back to Blue. And let's get more people out in nature, out on bike rides, running together. What did we miss the most during the pandemic? For those of us who are social beings, it was the lack of actually seeing people. Actually, I remember Joe met up with my family at the beach in Santa Cruz one day, and we hadn't seen each other, throughout the pandemic. And he's like, I just need to give you a hug. And I was like, yes to hugs, yes to being there for each other. Chase, I'm sure you could speak to the importance of that togetherness, but also the teamwork that's approached with teams in college.
Absolutely, because it's, for us, it's one of those things of we're so collaborative and we see each other all the time. That when we went Zoom, it made it much more difficult. That human connection is, we need it. If the pandemic did one thing, it did a couple of things for us. Some people got to start working from home and they loved that. The other thing it did was it brought platforms like this together and more of these around. And the third thing it did was that it actually brought a huge awareness of mental health and the need for a therapist. Because people, if you had something bubbling at the surface, it popped during the pandemic and your life melted over. The amount of addiction that's come out, the amount of relapses that have happened throughout all of this, it's just scary is what it is. And so, I was in graduate school, starting graduate school 13, 14 years ago. And one thing that was talked about was, how do you design your office to where it's inconspicuous and nobody knows how to find it? So that way this person doesn't look crazy walking in there. And now you hear comedians and athletes talking about BetterHelp and Talkspace and places like that to reach out and get help. And because that's the main thing, is that it's mental health has been put more on a platform to where it's more acceptable. My fiance and I were going to couples counseling. We share a personal trainer, and she's like, by the way, I told Shelby that we're going to therapy tonight. Is that okay? And I just started laughing. I was like, of course that's okay. Like, one, it's me, I'm a therapist. But two, it's like, we need to talk about that stuff in the public forum because it's totally acceptable now.
Their kids need to hear it, and their teachers need to reinforce it. And yeah, I mean, my kids know you don't mess with mom on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. because she's going and talking about you. I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, truly, it's very important. And I appreciate your vulnerability today. I think as we kind of come to a close here with the formal part of our program and then have some wrap-up comments, I guess I'd love to hear from each of you. And again, just really rapidly, what is the first thing you want to do when you are able to be with people again? And how can we be there for each other as well, so that we feel that envelopment of love and support? So one activity you want to do when the world isn't closed off to it.
I want guilt and fear-free hugs. That's all I want. I want somebody to just come up and arms open and not like, or I don't want this anymore. That's my comment.
Well, and I want to let them know that it's okay to not be okay, and that this happens to good people, and that there's help and there's hope out there, but you got to raise your hand. You got to ask for it.
I want to joke and laugh and I want to belly laugh with people and just feel good about life, because I'm a firm believer that this is a beautiful life. We just have to make it that way.
I think the pandemic really exposed a lot of us to a lot of things, and we all discovered something about ourselves. So I'm just going to go back to my grandfather's question of, when you messed up, is, did you learn anything? That's what I'll go back to.
I love it. I'm going to continue to coach my athletes that no one finishes alone. You don't have to be out there on the field of battle alone, that there's others out there that can run, walk, crawl with you.
Well, this has been incredible. You guys have created a conversation that clearly people don't want it to end. Somebody put in the chat that they wanted this to be on TV somewhere. So that being said, we did record today's conversation. We will be sharing it out in various social media forums, but we encourage people to share the messages from today as well, and tell your friends to watch it. Chase, Blue, do either of you have a resource for those who are struggling right now? And I mean, feel free to put your own organizations out there, but is there an 800 number? Is there a hotline? If somebody is struggling and this today has encouraged them to go out and get help, how do we help them find that?
Yeah, Chase, go first, brother.
Yeah, I'm going to butcher our website because it's one of two. It's either jflowershealth.com or jflowershealthinstitute.com. You can always come to us. And then, there's plenty of other resources out there like Talkspace, BetterHelp. Go to Psychology Today and find yourself a therapist if you're struggling with something, or just reach out to a friend for that matter. Reach out to one of your coaches because your coaches are there for you. I still hold a very personal relationship with my high school coach, junior college coach, and my university coach. And, they're always there as well too. And, they've coached thousands of athletes along the way, and they've probably been there before, seen that and done it. And so they can also be a help too.
Awesome. Perfect. Addict to Athlete, you can find all of our resources on our website, addicttoathlete.org. That's TOathlete.org. We've got all of our backlog podcasts. Randy's on there. That's a really good podcast we have. We have tons of recovery resources and online chapters of our meetings. We have open chapters all over. So if you need resources, it's fairly simple to jump on. All of our social media links and contact information are on that.
Perfect. Another resource that's been put out there. This is a education-based resource, 1-800-662-HELP or 4357. So 1-800-662-HELP. And just know that there are numerous ways to get assistance if you need it. And if you can't find anybody else, hey, I'm on Instagram at Joanne Pasternak, and you can come find me. I'm always happy to try to make a referral, as inexperienced as I may be. I think.
Yeah, and Joanne, I got to get my book in there. Okay.
Oh yes, please, and his book. Hold
Hey,
up your book.
Chase,
Anybody has a book, we need them right now. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Chase, be sure and tell Dr. Flowers, Randy Grimes said hello. Blue, I love you, man.
Brilliant.
Hey, and listen, my book, it just came out last Tuesday. We're already at bestseller, and you can get it at offcenterthebook.com. Okay. Go to Amazon. That'll take you, or go to offcenterthebook.com. It'll take you to Amazon, or just go to Amazon.
Amazing.
Great
Coach
title.
Coach Dicka wrote the foreword for it.
And thank you, Ms. Robinson. Marissa has put the link to the book out there, but let's keep this flowing. I want to thank you guys. Thank you for a great conversation. Thank you, Mike, Randy, Joe, Blue, Chase. It's timely, it's important. And with the ever increasing pressure on athletes to perform at higher degree of difficulty, frequency, it's not going to be extinguished easily. It's up to us. It's up to us to continue to raise awareness. It's up to us to make it okay to say, I need a timeout. I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but I have a feeling that this brain trust here can start some of that work and build the momentum around it. For those who are interested, our next Athletes Voices speaker series will take place on March 17th at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to be focusing on the very light topic of the role of sports in intercepting the pipeline to prison. So we don't always talk about heavy things, but when we do, we go deep. So join us on March 17th to learn more about the role. And, Blue, Mike, I know this one's going to resonate with you. This is about how we can intercept that eventuality that seems to be in the lives of so many of our young people around incarceration by just getting them into team activities and sports. To view our prior programs, please visit Athletes Voices, that's plural, athletesvoices.org, or Athletes Voices on LinkedIn or Facebook, or Athletes Vox, VOX, on Instagram and Twitter. We will be posting this on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other places where you can go to find your information, as well as on our website. We also want to just remind people that if you are an athlete and you're interested in joining us for our convening, we are providing scholarships to those who need it. This is going to be a spectacular 3.5 days of diving deeply into finding your voice as an athlete and how to leverage your platform. And by the way, Joe's going to be there. So if you like Joe and you want to show up, come on out to Santa Cruz with us in April 21st through 24th. And you can learn more about that and apply to participate via our website at athletesvoices.org and the Join Us link. So on behalf of our leadership team, I also want to give a shout out to Ms. Maddie Roman and Sophia Robb, our two incredible student interns, undergraduates who are living this work and supporting us in our efforts, and for nothing but the glory of being able to be affiliated. So ladies, thank you for your help. Panelists, thank you. And with that, we are going to close this episode and wish everybody all the best as you go about for the big guilt-free hugs and just coming together as athletes and advocates. So thank you from Athletes Voices, and take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.